Just imagine this: a quarter of the entire workforce suddenly out of a job, families losing their homes, their life savings vanishing overnight. Now, this wasn't a movie, this was the reality of the Great Depression. It was an economic catastrophe that didn't just change the country, it completely redefined it. So, we're going to break down how it all happened and why we're actually still feeling the aftershocks today. It's a huge question, right? How does an entire country go broke? I mean, how does a nation that seems to be at the absolute peak of its power and wealth just suddenly spiral into total financial ruin? Well, to get to the bottom of that, we have to go back to a time of incredible optimism and some really well-hidden dangers. You see, a collapse like this doesn't just happen overnight. It's not like a switch was flipped. To really get it, we need to look at the seeds of the crisis that were being planted all through the Roaring '20s. What happened was basically a perfect storm of three things that were all connected. Think of them like a line of dominoes, just perfectly set up to knock each other over. First, you had way too much easy credit. Second, a wild, speculative frenzy on Wall Street. And third, a big and pretty fateful decision by the Federal Reserve. Let's dig into each one. Okay, so that first domino was easy credit. Banks were handing out loans like candy, not asking too many questions. And this fueled this massive consumer spending spree. Now, on the surface, it looked like incredible prosperity, but it was all being built on this giant mountain of personal debt. And that mountain was getting really, really unstable. And that brings us to the next domino, the absolute mania on Wall Street. The stock market became this national obsession. You heard stories everywhere about ordinary people becoming millionaires like overnight. But here's the thing, this wasn't really investing. It was gambling, pure and simple, and on a massive scale. And it was about to go so wrong. A huge part of this whole speculative bubble was a practice called buying on margin. Basically, it let investors buy stocks with borrowed money. Now, this was amazing if the stock went up because it amplified your profits. But, and this is a huge but, it also amplified your risk. If the market turned, you didn't just lose your own money, you were now on the hook for the loan too. A total double whammy. So this created a really dangerous situation. On one hand, you had the economy roaring ahead on all this borrowed money. But at the same time, the Federal Reserve got worried about all this crazy speculation, and they decided to slam on the brakes by tightening the money supply. This made it harder to get new loans, but critically, it made it way harder to repay the ones people already had. The whole engine of the economy was about to seize up. With a setup like that, the stage was set. It was really only a matter of time before that first domino tipped over and started a chain reaction that would bring the whole system crashing down. And then, in October 1929, the bubble burst. The stock market crashed, and the fallout was just catastrophic. People who had bet their entire futures on the market were completely ruined, some in a matter of hours. Fortunes that took a lifetime to build just vanished. And the crash on Wall Street sent these massive shockwaves through the entire real economy. Businesses started to fail, which meant unemployment just soared. With no income, people couldn't pay their mortgages. They couldn't pay off those loans we talked about. The crisis on Wall Street had officially become a crisis on Main Street. So, with the country in an absolute economic freefall, it became painfully clear that the old ways of thinking just weren't going to cut it. This crisis demanded a response on a scale nobody had ever seen before. One that would forever change the relationship between the American people and their government. And that response came from President Franklin D. Roosevelt. He launched what became known as the New Deal, a whole series of incredibly ambitious programs designed for relief, recovery, and reform. And this was way more than just another government program. It was a fundamental shift in the whole philosophy of American government. The New Deal was this whirlwind of new agencies and laws. You had the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, created to police Wall Street. You had the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, set up to protect people's savings in banks. And then there were these massive public works projects, you've probably heard of them, the WPA, the CCC, that put millions of people back to work building roads and bridges and parks. But here's a really crucial point. The New Deal was not a perfect solution for everyone. While it was an absolute lifeline for millions, its benefits were not shared equally. In many cases, racial and social inequalities were actually reinforced by some of these programs, leaving many of the most vulnerable Americans behind. So the real legacy of the Great Depression isn't just about the economic lessons we learned. It's about the fundamental way it reshaped American society.
It led to the creation of a social safety net and this whole new understanding that the government has a role to play in protecting its citizens from economic disaster. It was a turning point that honestly continues to shape our political debates to this day.
When you look back, the Great Depression is this powerful reminder of just how quickly things can change and how a big crisis can force us to rethink our most basic ideas about how society should work. And it kind of leaves us with a question to chew on. What are the big challenges of our time, and how are they going to reshape our world for the generations to come?